Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Tara Moran. I'm a librarian at Mastic Mauritius Shirley Community Library, and I'm so happy to have you here for our program all about piping plovers. This is our third virtual program with the Fire Island National Seashore. We're trying to continue our series. I'm very excited to have this one tonight. So tonight from Fire Island, we have Pat Riley. She has been a park ranger with the Fire Island National Seashore for about 7 years. Previous to that, her other careers were in the US Navy and as a teacher, and she has a degree in biology, and we're so happy to have her tonight. We are recording tonight's program, so if you want to review it, it should be on Facebook within a day or two. If you have any questions throughout, Pat will surely answer as we go. Feel free to put them in the chat, or as appropriate, feel free to ask as we go. And with that, Pat, take it away.
Alrighty, so I'm glad you guys could make it. I hope some more people pop into the program, but welcome. Thank you to Tara and to the Mastic Mauritius Shirley Community Library for having me back for these monthly virtual trips to Fire Island. We have a lot of programming going on at the end. I've mentioned it before in the pre-program banter, but I'll put the website address into the chat box so that, and I'd encourage everybody to go ahead and look at our calendar of events and sign up for anything that, that appeals to you. We've got a lot going on. It's still the shoulder season. We're not into the full swing yet, but we've managed to put quite a few things onto the calendar to get people out to Fire Island. And I hope this kind of encourages people to think about coming in person. People can be on this call from anywhere, but if you happen to be in the Mastic Mauritius Shirley area, it's so easy to just drive down William Floyd Parkway over the bridge, and our visitor center is that brown octagon building to the right. So I hope to see you there. Just on any day, we're right now staffing that visitor center Saturday and Sunday and holidays, but from Memorial Day on, we should have people there 5 days a week. So there'll be stuff going on. The Rangers always have something. If it's not a planned program, we've got Junior Ranger programs. So kids can just pop in, get these Junior Ranger books, and do the activities and earn a badge. So that's always really fun. And we're going to have pop-up programs coming. Just set up a tent, and we're going to have painting or whatever on the beach. So so we're going to talk about piping plovers today. I think there's misinformation out there. It's the bird that everyone says, yeah, it tastes like chicken. People are unhappy because we restrict some kinds of visitation on the beach in the summer while the piping plovers are nesting. And hopefully by the end of this program, you'll have a little more appreciation for why we do close the beach to protect them. So from March 15th through Labor Day, you will see signs like this on the beach. Do not enter. This is what we call symbolic fencing. These white posts with string. And they don't physically keep you out of the area, but it's where we ask people, please don't enter here. It's not just plovers. We have least terns, which are endangered in New York as well. Other kinds of shorebirds that sort of need a little space in order to nest, and they nest at the upper beach. So up close to the dunes, especially sandy areas where there's no vegetation, are where we find these birds nesting. You might see a wire circle about 6 feet across, and these are called exclosures, not enclosures to keep the birds in. They are exclosures to keep the predators out. And when we locate a nest, lots of times they put up an exclosure to keep the fox, and believe it or not, the seagulls come down and eat the plover eggs. So we try to protect them on the beaches from March. So If you look at this map, it gives you an idea of where we find piping plover. So the pink areas are where they're going to be breeding. So here on the beaches of Long Island, up through Nova Scotia, there's an area around the Great Lakes and the plains. And all the birds are arriving in March and April from those blue areas. So they spend their winter in the coastal areas from the Carolinas down around the Panhandle, coastal Texas, Louisiana, and Mexico, and down into the Caribbean islands from Barbados, Cuba, and the Bahamas. So these are the areas where they spend the winter, and they do migrate into onto our beaches in the spring. So threatened and endangered. Let's talk about these terms a little bit. Piping plovers first received protection under the Endangered Species Act in 1985. So in the Great Lakes area, they are endangered. They're 100% endangered. On the Atlantic coast, they are threatened. And in their winter habitat, they're considered threatened. So we'll talk a little bit about what that means. An endangered species, while we look at this picture of eggs, an endangered species, by definition, is one that is in danger of extinction throughout all or a significant portion of its range. A threatened species is one likely to become endangered within the foreseeable future. So any regulations that apply to endangered species also apply to threatened species. So here in New York, they're on the federal threatened list, but on the New York State endangered list. So why are they endangered? Well, they were common along the Atlantic coast during much of the 19th century, but they nearly disappeared due to excessive hunting for the millinery trade. So anybody know what the millinery trade is? I saw Joanne's, yes, mouth moving, and yes, it's ladies' hats. So take a peek. Back in the early 1900s, look at these hats. These are historical photos and drawings that show complete birds stuck on the hats. So in the 1860s, it's estimated that 5 million birds were killed every year for ladies' hats. So in the late 1890s, women themselves actually banded together, cooperated, and women conservationists rallied to protect the birds. And in 1918, Congress passed the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which makes it unlawful to pursue, hunt, take, capture, kill, possess, sell, purchase, barter, import, export, or transport any migratory bird. So this is still in effect today. And by the letter of the law, if you find any wild bird feather, you're not allowed to have it. No one is going to come after you for picking up a seagull feather. But the fear was that, where'd you get that feather? You know, if you stuck half a blue jay on your hat, where's the rest of the bird? So the protections are still in place today, which is kind of interesting because not very many ladies' hats have whole birds on them anymore. So following passage of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act in 1918, the numbers recovered. And in the 1940s, piping plovers were probably at the largest numbers there ever were. And I'm not sure I know those numbers, but they've declined since World War II because of development and recreational use of beaches. So the beaches, the human population was much smaller, much fewer buildings and homes on the beach. And since that time, the numbers have steadily declined. So they think there are about 800 breeding pairs. That's not a lot of birds, not a lot at all. About 200 of them in New York. Last year, I think we might have had 20 or 22 nests on Fire Island. So they're in other areas, not just on Fire Island. And there's not a lot of them. There's not a lot of them. So the piping plover became protected under the Endangered Species Act in 1986. Okay, it's threatened. This is, I don't need to read this to you, but New York State, they are endangered. And other states, I'll just read to you the other states where the piping plover is endangered. Maine, New Hampshire, New Jersey, Maryland, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. So most of the areas where we see plovers breeding in the summer, they are endangered locally, even though the federal government doesn't list them as endangered, but only protected. So the big problem is, why do we care? I mean, I'd be interested to hear you guys. Why do you think we care? Anybody have a comment? Nobody. Okay. Why do we care?
Hey, I'd like to jump in. I think we care because there's a decline in all the species, in so many species.
True.
And you know, a lot of people say that everything has a purpose in the environment, that we're all one big system. Mm-hmm. So if we start, you know, if certain parts of that system start to disappear, then the whole system is at risk of collapsing, because, you know, animals need us, we need the plants need, you know, so it's a big circle.
Right. Yeah, we don't always understand the interconnection. Somebody once explained it to me. If you think of a jet, okay, you're going to get on a jet, the pandemic's over, you're going to go wherever you want to go. Let's take a bolt out of that jet. Let's take a bolt here, a bolt there. At what point is that the bolt that's going to make the jet fall apart? So that was a really nice analogy that I heard. But part of it is that they are an indicator species. So they are sensitive to human presence. They're sensitive to the food source, the weather, everything. And the indicators help us understand the entire environment or the entire ecosystem. So they can reveal information to us about pollution, about ambient temperature, right? Climate change has an effect on their range. The nutrients in their food and their food. All of these things can be indicated by the presence of a bird like this. So when we see piping plovers, we can say, yes, that's a healthy beach. The food that they eat is healthy and abundant. So this is a good place for them. And when they disappear, we know that something is askew, something is wrong in the whole system. So plovers are the first shorebirds to arrive on the breeding grounds. So they started in probably the last week of March to arrive on the beaches of Fire Island. Here's a picture of a plover. If you notice, it is tagged. So we do have scientists out on our beaches every day in the summer, and they're monitoring the plovers. They're making a count of them. They're counting how many nests, how many eggs they lay. We keep track of how many of the eggs actually hatch and how long it takes those fledglings or those hatchlings to fledge, to leave the nest and fly on their own and become independent individuals. So we do monitor these very closely, and that's kind of an interesting thing. If you're ever on the beach, ask a ranger, how the plovers doing? How many we got out there? Because you probably won't really see them. They are very well camouflaged. If you look at this photo, look at that, how gray that bird is. I mean, you're going to see some other photos where they're so well camouflaged, they're tough to spot. So this is a picture of a plover nest. They don't really build a nest. This isn't a great photo. We have some more better ones, but it's called a scrape. So the bird will sit on the sand and use their feet to kick sand out behind them and form just a little depression in the sand. So sometimes they put shells in it, sometimes not. But the eggs are sort of speckled and blend in with the sand no matter where they are. They make the nest during courtship. And it's usually, again, at the upper beach. I told you about this symbolic fencing. They're up close to the dunes in a little dent, smaller than a human footprint would be on the beach. And here's a nice picture. You can see the eggs a little better. This is a little clearer photo. And even though they usually lay their eggs on the open beach, sometimes there they are near the beach grass. They lay 3 to 4 eggs. And the eggs are very well camouflaged, as you can see, for sort of dirty sand, clean sand, shells on the beach. These are really hard to spot. So here's a plover parent sitting on eggs, and that is that scrape or nest. It's like a footprint, right? It's a little footprint in the sand, and both sexes will incubate the eggs. So the male and the female both sit on those eggs to hatch them. And there's another one. I don't know if it's a male or a female. It's one of the two sitting on these little speckled eggs. This is a really good photo. And they start to incubate them after the 4th egg or the last egg is laid. The eggs take 25 to 31 days to hatch. And when you see a bird like this sitting on its eggs, it's protecting them from, it's keeping them warm, but something you might not think about is it's also keeping them out of the sun. So if these birds are disturbed and they move, not only will the eggs get cold, they could cook.
Oh,
so we don't want to frighten the birds so they leave their eggs even for a short time, because the eggs are sensitive and they may never hatch if they're left either to get cold, to cool down, or to cook in the sun. So the eggs can actually overheat. So here's the cute one. Can you see that? Those babies. So the chicks down in the bottom, they are the size of a cotton ball, not a jumbo cotton ball or a regular size cotton ball. And that's really how big they are. They are what's called precocial, which means, okay, you've heard of a precocious child. He's the one who talks when he's 6 months old and walks when he's a year. Precocial means when they hatch, they can feed themselves. They're not born naked like a sparrow or other kinds of songbirds. They're born feathered like a chick. Think of a chicken chick. When they hatch, they sort of fluff up pretty quickly, and they have to feed themselves right away. They leave the nest and follow their parents, and they feed at the water's edge. So the food, we'll talk about what they eat, but they feed at the water's edge. And one of the results or issues with human traffic, and I'm just talking about if you walk along the beach, and if there were a lot of people walking on the beach, the birds cannot get to the water's edge to feed. So where they might fledge in 28 days, if this was a sort of normal 4 weeks before they could fly and sort of be on their own, it takes them a week or 2 weeks longer because they don't gain enough weight. They don't eat enough food. So this is one of the impacts that human traffic on the beach has, just people walking down the beach. So again, we try to be respectful so that these things can have room to feed, as well as, you know, after the parents are done sitting on the eggs, the chicks really need their space in order to get down to the water's edge to get some food. So they are everywhere on the beach. I mean, they could be anywhere, let's put it that way. If you're walking, if you go over the bridge at Smith Point and turn to the right, go west where our symbolic fencing is, that 1.5 mile stretch, maybe there are 6 or 8 nests, but each one could have a 100-meter radius around its nest. So if you couldn't see the chick, there's another picture of it where it hopped up on top of a shell. So that's on just a regular clamshell. That chick has also already been tagged. It's very interesting. The scientists that come from Virginia Tech every year keep track of these tagged birds. Lots of them come back. If this little L90 was hatched on our beach, he probably will come back next year and try to nest. So depending on the day that they hatched, these could be on the beach until the end of August. These little flightless chicks that are the size of a cotton ball. And I'd highly encourage everybody, and I will, little feedback there. I'm very happy to put our website web address in the chat a little closer to the end, because we do have a program coming up in May where we're inviting the public to come out with their binoculars, and we're going to go look at plover chicks, which will be really fun. So, so here's an adult plover. What do they eat when they're down at the water's edge? They eat marine worms. They eat fly larvae, small insects, crustaceans, so tiny crabs, a very small mole crab perhaps, and small invertebrates. So any of those small creatures that you find when you dig in the sand, that's what these guys are looking for in the sand as well. So I believe this is a video. A very interesting thing that piping plovers do, and other birds do it as well, is a broken wing display. So if they're disturbed and the parent bird doesn't want you to disturb the nest, what they'll do is this, and I'm hoping this plays and you can hear it. You're going to hear the wind. Okay, so that is their broken wing display. And as you might imagine, it uses a lot of energy. Look at all that flapping that bird is doing. So we try really hard not to disturb them enough that they do this broken wing display. We really, the object is to sort of leave them alone, give them their space, and try not to disturb them or get in the way of where they need to go and feed. There we are again. I want to go my next. Okay, so this is, I'd mentioned this earlier, the exclosure. It's not an enclosure. We're not trying to keep the birds in. They can hop very easily through the gaps in this piece of fence, but it's to keep predators out. And the staff can actually, when a nest is located, because we don't want to disturb the birds too much, we don't want them to abandon their nest, staff digs the little trench and puts this in probably 10 minutes flat. So these exclosures, you may see them. Please don't go anywhere near them. This is likely where a nest is, and we're trying to keep the eggs safe from predators. And here's a really interesting photo. So, can you spot the plover? Is my first question. If you want to put in the chat, or I can't see everybody, if you want to raise your hand, can you spot the plover? And can you identify the bird that is on top of the exclosure? Anybody? Julia?
I do not see the plover. My guess,
Okay.
it's in the sand.
It is in the sand. They're tough to spot.
Maybe to the left of the
It
Clover.
is. I'm not sure if I can you see my pointer? Can you see my cursor?
Yeah, the pointer, yep.
It's right there.
Yes, they blend in.
They really blend in. So if you look at this same photo, there's a little close-up of the plover on the left, and there's a close-up of that osprey on the right. And notice he has a fish. He probably did not land here to try to eat plover chicks or get at the plover eggs. He probably just sat there to eat his fish. But I think this is a really great photo and shows the exclosure doing its job. And you can kind of see the netting. So there's mist netting, the kind of netting that you might buy to put over your blueberry bushes at home or over your garden so the birds don't get in. It's a very lightweight sort of plastic netting, and it's stretched over the top and tied around to keep, as I mentioned before, the gulls do go out and try to predate the eggs. This is a really interesting picture. So again, here's this little sign. Humans walking on the beach disturb the plovers. They can cause them to abandon their nest in the worst case. It interrupts their feeding when they cannot get to the water's edge. And this is one of the reasons why we have dog restrictions. And, you know, I know the dog lovers are animal lovers, and I hope they understand that the plovers see a dog as a predator. It's got 4 legs. It looks like a fox or any other type of predator they might have experienced or be imprinted to know, and they may abandon their nest. Another thing we don't allow on the beaches at this time of year when we have our plover closures is kites. And does anybody have an idea of why we might not want people to fly a kite near the plover exclosures or near the symbolic fencing? Any ideas?
Look like birds of prey, or
exactly.
go out of control like my children's do.
Even if it's in control, if you're flying your kite perfectly, it casts a shadow. And the shadow is not unlike the shadow that a predator might cast on the beach. So again, dogs and kites are seen or may be perceived by the birds as predators and might cause them to abandon their nests. So how big is the plover? There's a baseball on the beach. We've already determined that they're really tough to see. And so there you can see one next to a baseball. If you see a flock of birds, 20, 30 more, those are probably not plovers. I sort of bet you that they're not plovers. Plovers are seen in singles or maybe pairs, maybe small groups when the hatchlings are running around the beach, 5, 6 at a time. But piping plovers are not the big flocks of birds you see right at the edge of the waves. Those are mostly sanderlings or other types of sandpipers. They're also feeding in the edge, but those get up and fly away as a flock. The plovers are gonna go fly back up to the dune, or they're gonna make their little peeping sound, which we're gonna hear now. So before you see them, you might hear this sound. Oops, I didn't want to replay. So that's what they sound like. Oops. And here's a plover on the beach. Again, really tough to see. So I'd be very interested by a show of yes or no in the chat. Have you seen a plover? Or did you think you saw a plover and now you're convinced that it probably was not a plover? I'd be interested to hear if somebody goes to the beach. Have you seen one? Julia, oh yeah, you can raise your hand. Okay, there's one who's seen a plover on the beach. Anybody else?
Over.
Excellent.
Just one.
You might see just one. Look into the chat. Yes, Chris O has seen one. So they're out there, they're tough to see. They are really, really well camouflaged. Here's another one. Took you a second, right? When you, oh, and Connie Connie, are you asking a question or are you raising your hand? You've seen a plover. Okay, when I look at this photo, it always takes a minute, fills the screen, and there's that little bird in the middle of the beach there, just hanging out by himself. And by the end of August, most of the nesting activity is done. End of August, they're flying south. This is a great picture because they often walk along the tire tracks. And there's no beach driving on our beach now, but sometimes the rangers go out there, and sometimes the chicks are in the tracks, and they're really tough to see. They're really hard to see. And here's another video. This is one from our Facebook page where a biologist talks about
I'm a wildlife biologist at Fire Island National Seashore, and I monitor and protect piping plovers on Fire Island beaches. So piping plovers, they're a federally threatened species, so they're covered under the Endangered Species Act. We really care about preserving this species for future generations, so that's why we take a lot of actions to protect their nesting areas. We monitor them to see how well they're doing, and we ultimately know then the success at our beaches for piping plovers. Plovers, they're a small sand-colored, kind of stocky shorebird. Breeding adults have an orange beak with a black tip, and they have a black crown on their head and also a black band on their neck. They like to nest in sort of upper beach habitat. They fly in, establish territories in these areas, hoping to find a mate, and then hopefully once after that they do courtship, and we find their nests in these areas.
I want you to continue watching the video. I just want to make sure everybody saw that plover and the chicks running through the grass. And if anybody wants, we can play it all again. I'll finish this, it's short. But there was a plover and chicks running around in the grass there.
Locate their nests by following and watching their behaviors, and we look for what's called scrapes, which are soft depressions in the sand itself that they actually lay their eggs right onto the sand in what we call a nest bowl. And once they've laid their last egg, usually 4, they hatch about 27 days after they've laid that last egg. So when we find nests, we want to have a good estimated hatch date, just so we know when to do nest checks to look for hatching, but also because we, in some areas where we have a lot of predators, we like to put a predator exclosure around the nest. This predator exclosure helps from animals digging in or flying into and predating the nest before it hatches. And so these are important in basically ensuring hatching success for these nests. One behavior that plovers exhibit is called a broken wing display, and this is pretty specific to this species. So if you're in an area and you see a bird vocalizing really loudly and pretending to have an injured wing. You want to back up immediately, very slowly, and inform someone, because you probably just stumbled across a plover nest. They do this to attract your attention away from their nest, so they're trying to lure you, since they perceive you as a predator. Piping plovers are important for biological diversity at sites, and they're really an integral part of the coastal environment. So because of that, we like to balance their survival and their protection with recreation on beaches that happens every spring and summer.
Oops. So I hope everybody saw the plovers sort of running around in that video. That was a really great example. And as I said, they're tough to spot. You kind of have to know where they are. And it's not those flocks that are at the edge of the surf running up and down. So I've pretty much covered all the material that I wanted to cover. I hope you have some questions or comments.
Hi there, Julia here. I didn't see them in the video. I think I saw one, but I didn't see the babies running around.
Well, I can play it again if we, it was short. Anybody want to, we can watch it. I'll watch the video again. This time, if you don't want to listen to the biologist, you can look for the birds.
Look over the video.
Sorry, what did you say, Julia?
I said, can you talk over the video? Because then you can say, there they are.
Yeah, okay.
I'm a wildlife biologist at Fire Island National Seashore, and I monitor and protect piping plovers on Fire Island beaches. So piping plovers, they're a federally threatened species, so they're covered under the Endangered Species Act. We really care about preserving this species for future generations, so that's why we take a lot of actions to protect their nesting areas. We monitor them to see how well they're doing, and we ultimately know then the success at our beaches for piping plovers. Plovers, they're small, sand-colored, kind of stocky.
Okay, this photo has one adult, right? We see the one adult.
Shorebird. Breeding adults have an orange beak with a black tip, and they have a black crown on their head and also a black band on their neck.
Can you see that baby?
In sort of upper beach habitat. They fly.
There's a chick right here that just ran over and ran back.
In established territories in these areas.
Oops, didn't mean to do that. Sorry. Bring this back up.
And also a black band on their neck.
So see that chick right there?
They like to nest in sort of upper beach habitat. They fly in established territories in these areas, hoping to find a mate, and then
so there are two chicks. There's one right here. The other one I don't see.
basically once after that, they do courtship, and we find their nest in those areas.
Oops. Sorry about that. Julia, did you see that one now?
Sorry, yes, I was typing in the chat.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But,
so there were two chicks scooting around in sort of the edge of the grass. They're tough to spot. They're really tough to spot. What I'm gonna do is put in the chat now. Let me get back to my questions. Our website, our web address. Okay, yes, they move so quickly. Oops. So that's the web address for our for Fire Island National Seashore's website. When you go onto our website, there's an event calendar. So if you look for the event calendar, you'll be able to see what's coming up. They're not posted for May just yet, but there is a program coming up in May. If you keep an eye on that, where we're going to take visitors out. We encourage you to bring your binoculars, and we're going to go and see if we can spot some plovers. So that'll be fun. So any questions?
Yes, I have one. So throughout the summer, we go to the beach towards the evenings. What areas specifically are they? Are they more towards the wilderness center and further to stay away from the beachgoers?
Yes. If you were to go tomorrow, let's say, or this weekend, over to our Wilderness Visitor Center and walk west, you will see those string enclosures, our symbolic fencing. And there are plovers. They're claiming their territories. I don't know if they've started to actually nest yet, but they are on the beach, and I always hear them before I see them. And then when you look around, there'll be one flying around, or look in the dune and you'll see them running around like we saw in the video. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
Has there ever been a situation where the birds would lay their eggs like maybe like too close to the inlet, and because that sand is always moving, has any of the biologists there ever had to move a nest, like physically move it someplace else?
They have not moved them, but yes, we've lost nests to overwash. If there's a big storm and they've put their nest in a little, I don't know, too low an area, yes, the surf has come up and sort of swamped some nests, and the birds they'll abandon that nest. We can't really move them. They're very, very sensitive. It is possible, and it has happened when they're disturbed, seriously disturbed and abandon a nest. Up to a certain point, they will re-nest. So they'll pick a different spot and lay eggs all over again. And this might happen through, let's say, the end of June. But after that, it's too late. They need enough time to be able to lay the eggs, hatch them, have those hatchlings gain enough weight to fledge or be able to fly and take care of themselves. So yes, they have been lost to water. Yeah, that was happened a few years ago.
Thank you. That's sad, but thank you.
Yeah. Also a question about oyster catchers. Yes, the oyster catchers are nesting now too. They're in sort of the same areas in the wilderness. Again, over the bridge, turn right toward the west, that 1.5 mile stretch, because there's no car traffic now. There will be no dogs on the beach. The other shorebirds we might see are the terns and also oyster catchers, which I don't have a picture here to show you, but if you were to look it up, it's a sort of a tall, orange-legged, black and white bird with a big red beak. They're very unusual looking, and their chicks are very funny looking. So, but they're out there. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I'm hoping we see everybody next month.
Yes, that's right. I wanted to point out that we do have another video in our series coming up on Tuesday, May 11th. That's at 7 o'clock, and we'll be exploring the Fire Island salt marshes. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that, give us a preview.
Sure. Again, if you've been to Fire Island, as you're going over the bridge, you look to the right. The salt marsh is that low grassy area on the bay, on the Great South Bay. We have salt marsh on Long Island and Fire Island. And because it gets flooded by the tides, the plants that grow there are very, very well adapted to salt water. So there's some very specific grasses and plants that live there. And also because they're flooded, some crustaceans and fish tend to lay their eggs up on the salt marsh. And it protects them a little bit because the bigger fish can't get there. But they also become a buffet for the shorebirds. So it's a really, really interesting ecosystem on the salt marsh. And we would love to be able to perhaps do it live from the salt marsh when we do this presentation, because 7 o'clock, it won't be dark yet, right? We might be able to do it live with the sound. I'm not sure how it would work, but I'm trying to figure that one out. So it would be like a virtual tour of the salt marsh, but there's a big salt marsh at Watch Hill. So anybody who's ever taken the ferry from Patchogue over to our visitor center at Watch Hill, we have a boardwalk nature trail that goes over the salt marsh, and it's really pretty fabulous. Lots of birds and all kinds of things. You walk right over it, you can look down and see stuff. So it's a great, I'd encourage anybody to go over to Watch Hill and walk on the nature walk.
That's great. Before we leave, we have one more question from Charlie, and we'd like to know, do they nest at John Boyle Island in Belleport Bay?
I do not believe so. And John Boyle Island, I have been close to it in my boat. There are gulls, lots of seagulls nest there. There's other birds there. There's egrets, ibis nest there. But it doesn't have those big open stretches of beach like we have on Fire Island. It's more tidal. So there's a lot of grass and underbrush. There's a couple of trees out there. Charlie, have you been to John Boyle Island, or you've just seen it from afar? If you want to unmute or type it in. I see another comment, too many gulls, true. It's not really that open, dry sand that the plovers need. It's more sort of muddy sand around the edges and then some shrubbery, and it's actually got a couple of trees. So I do not believe that plovers nest there. Good question. From afar, okay. Yeah, so if you've looked at it from either from the Fire Island side or the Long Island side with binoculars or whatever, you see those trees there and a lot of bushes. Because I've been right up to it with my boat, and the gulls make a racket because they don't like people getting too close. There's no big wide sandy beaches there, which is what the plovers like. Anybody else? Well, also, please, I'm going to encourage everybody to check the Fire Island National Seashore website, especially our event calendar, and see what's coming up. And we should get some flyers out to the library as well, Tara, so that your patrons can take a look and, grab a flyer and see what's going on month by month. We put one out usually about a week before the new month starts, so people can sign up.
Very good, very good. We have a display where they go right by on the main floor, so that's great. And of course, come to the communitylibrary.org/programs website to sign up for next month's program on May 11th for the salt marshes. Thank you so much, Pat, for such an informative presentation. They're such cute birds, I have to say. They look so cuddly.
Well, I hope people learned something. I hate to say it, but there's a lot of negative comments when we talk about plovers because people are restricted. They can't drive their cars or walk their dogs on the beach. And it seems like a very small thing to give up for a little while in the summer so these birds can survive. So. All right, well, thank you to the library. And if there's no more questions, I hope we see everybody next month.
Okay, very good. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Ciao, ciao.